Making a difference in her community is what keeps my guest passionate and driven to succeed. Recognized for her achievements in helping those in need, she's been featured on The View, Essence, People, Good Morning America, and CNN for her outstanding public service work. As the CEO and founder of RLD Limited Group, a background screening and consulting firm for small businesses and nonprofit organizations, she brings her expert background in law enforcement to help others stay compliant. RLD Limited Group strives for the highest standards in security and compliance, helping companies and organizations find, screen, and hire the right people. My guest got her start in law enforcement with the Arlington County Sheriff's Department in Virginia, where she served as deputy sheriff, recruiter, and test administrator. She later became the first African American female with the City of Falls Church Police Department, teaching drug curriculum and public safety programs at schools. She also worked there as a recruiter, test administrator, and background administrator. It was during this time when she found her calling in helping those in need. So she co-founded the national nonprofit Black and Missing Foundation Incorporated, an organization that helps raise awareness for missing persons of color. She has received numerous awards for her work, including BET Network's Black Girls Rock Community Change Agent Award in 2017. A native of Spartanburg, South Carolina, she attended the Northern Virginia Criminal Justice Training Academy. She is also a member of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. Please help me welcome my guest, the Derrica Wilson.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. How are you doing today?
I am doing great and so happy to be joining you. It's like old times as South Carolinians.
That's right. That's right. Us Sparkle City girls.
Yes.
No, thank you. I appreciate your time today. I appreciate you being on the show. I'm so excited to talk about all the wonderful things that you are doing and to tell your story. So tell my listeners and viewers a little bit about yourself and your story and how it has gotten you to where you are today.
Absolutely. Again, I'm Derrica Wilson. Everyone back home knows me by D Drummond.
Yeah.
Drummond, that's my maiden name. Born and raised in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And in 1999, I actually moved to the DC area, leaving all of my family there just to pursue my career in law enforcement. And DC is home. I'm married. I have two beautiful children. I love just being able to give back and make a difference in the community. And so that has been a great motivator for me. And I think I picked that up from my grandmother, which I know we'll talk about that a little later. But, just to be able to make a difference, because I firmly believe that everyone has a purpose on this earth. Everyone is not afforded the opportunity to realize what it is that they're supposed to do. So I am very blessed to know exactly what my assignments are and how to fulfill that while I'm here.
That's awesome. That's a blessing. I mean, I feel like that is, if you're able to achieve that, then you've achieved it. And to be living it, at an early time in your life, that's a blessing.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's interesting because, growing up in the South, I grew up in the church. I am a God-fearing, praying sister.
Amen.
And when I actually went off to college, and this was in 1996 after graduating high school, I had given my life to Christ, and I was at church, and the pastor called me up in front of everyone in the congregation. And I'm like, why is he calling me up and putting me on the spot? What can he possibly want to say to me? Because of course, when he's like pointing me out, I'm looking around like, why is he calling me up? And he actually told me, he said, God is going to use you in more ways than you can imagine. And growing up in church, and my parents, my grandparents, they always used to say, you never question God. So of course, I'm like, well, what is it that he wants me to do? And I feel that all of my experiences, all of my growth has gotten me to where I am today, because everything I've done contribute to where I am right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And so listening to you and you talk about a career in law enforcement, what made you want to have a career in law enforcement?
Well, I really wanted to have a career in law enforcement because I wanted to be able to help the community. It was my way of giving back. When I started off, I said, let me, either I'm going to be an educator, I'm going to go into law enforcement. That's still my contribution to my community. And so I decided to go into the police force. I started with the deputy sheriff's office. But when I became a police officer, I said, well, why can't I have my cake and eat it too? So I started, working on the streets as a street patrol officer, but I also went into the schools and I taught the DARE curriculum, which is drug abuse resistance education. I also taught the GREAT program, which is gang resistance education training program. So it was my way to still connect with the youth because they are our future. And that is something that I always wanted to do, be able to connect with the youth in some sort of capacity and let them understand that not everyone that's wearing the blue uniform is bad. I wanted them to see, especially the minority community, I really wanted them to see someone that looks like them. Because at that time, it wasn't a lot of us. I was the first and only Black female police officer in the history of the agency.
Now
And
tell me about that. I mean, that's huge. That is a huge accomplishment. And I mean, so what was that experience like being the only, the first African American female on that police department?
I was met with a bunch of challenges, to say the least. But it was a great experience for me, to be the first of anything. And I felt that I really had to set the bar. I had to lead by example. The issue with false church is that when I was there, the problem wasn't on the outside, it was on the inside and changing the culture and how they view us. And that was a challenge in itself. But I stayed there for 8 years and I left to start working with DC government. It was a family decision because I had became a mother, I had given birth to my second child, and I needed more of a stable schedule, and also just to get my organization off the ground with my sister-in-law. But it was a wonderful experience. I wouldn't change it for anything in the world. I look at the climate of what's happening around us nowadays, and I would love to put my uniform back on and recruit other brothers and sisters that look like me so we can be the change agent that our community so desperately needs.
Yeah, and so say for instance you did go back to your uniform and you were out there trying to recruit our brothers and sisters now. What would you actually say to them to get them to buy into becoming a law enforcement officer? Because right now, I mean, let's just be real, the climate around police officers is not a positive one, but we know that there are good ones out there. I truly believe there are more good ones than there are ones that are not. So how would you encourage a brother or sister to get involved in the law enforcement?
Well, it's interesting you asked that question, Carmen. So with our organization, Black and Missing Foundation, my best friend, she passed away unexpectedly 2 years ago. And she left money in her will for our organization and for us to continue to carry her name forward. And she was prior law enforcement at the time of her death. And we decided to pay it forward and bless, college bound students who were actually headed to college and a career in law enforcement with the scholarships. So we awarded 5 scholarships to criminal justice college bound high school seniors because we want them to pursue this. I mean, we need more diversity. The ones that are these high ranking officials, typically they don't look like us.
Yeah.
And so we want them to go out there, make a difference, be the voice for the voiceless. We have to be able to change the narrative here. A lot of the police forces, the chiefs, the sheriffs, they're elected positions. And so it's going to be very important for us to vote also to get those bad apples out and get the good ones in there. But it's going to take all of us. It's all of our responsibility. But when you are able to be able to contribute to a child that's looking to do some good and continue their education, why not embrace it and support them and push them through?
Yeah, I agree with you. You mentioned Black and Missing, your foundation. Tell us a little bit about that and how that came to be.
So I don't know if you recall the Tamika Houston story, Carmen. Tamika Houston went missing for Spartanburg, South Carolina,
Yes, yes.
and she went missing in 2004.
Hmm.
And her aunt Rebecca, who's also in media, she struggled to garner local coverage, much less national. And so my sister-in-law and I, we had discussions around this issue numerous times about our people going missing and no one's paying attention to them.
Hmm.
Months later, Natalie Holloway went missing, and of course, her name became a household name. And
Yeah.
so we conducted some research, and during that time when we actually launched Black and Missing, which has been 12 years ago, we launched in 2008. 30% of missing persons in the United States were persons of color. That number has increased to 40%. And so, we've come a long way. We still have a long way to go. It was very difficult in the very beginning when we launched Black and Missing because when we're boots on the ground, so we believe in going out into the neighborhood, showing these flyers, conducting these searches, and our community had no knowledge that this was an issue because when they turned their televisions on, they didn't see anyone that
Yeah.
looked like them.
Right.
And so we had to change that narrative and less is more. Less of one particular race and more of everyone that's missing, greater the chances of a reunion. Our message is not to dishonor any community, it's to even the playing field
Yeah.
because, missing persons is not a Black issue, it's not a white issue, it's an American issue. And we are now the voice for our voiceless in our community.
That's so great. I remember when I was speaking with you back in DC a couple of years ago and listening to you talk about this organization. I was so amazed that you and your sister-in-law put this together. Number one, that you had the heart for it and that you had the spirit to go forth and do this. What is it that you saw? I mean, obviously it was with the case in Spartanburg, but what else did you see even through maybe your law enforcement that led you through your law enforcement experience that led you to understand and know that, hey, us people of color, we're not getting the exposure, we're not getting the coverage we need. And how did you use your law enforcement background to launch this particular organization and to, make it be what it is, which is finding our missing people? How did you bring those two together?
So law enforcement and media are two critical professions needed in finding our people. Natalie is in public relations and media and law enforcement. And for us to be able to use our expertise, our background to help these families navigate, how to work with law enforcement, how to file a police report. We get tips in all the time. This is a lot on these families. So for us to be able to carry their burden on our shoulders, because it's too much, when your loved one is missing, not knowing if they're being mistreated, not knowing if they're hungry, if they're cold, just the unknown is too much for someone to bear. And so for us to be able to continue to carry that torch, working with law enforcement, sharing the tips, I know when it comes to missing children, they often like to label our kids as runaways. And so
Why is
runaways do not
that?
receive
Why is
the
that?
Amber Alert.
Why?
Well, it's that's just how they like to classify our cases. I mean, we have our own, hurdles dealing with law enforcement, and I'm prior law enforcement. And so, while some agencies have really embraced, there are still some that we're still trying to, there's still a tug of war, but we're not giving up. We're very persistent. And then when it comes to media, Carmen, you have no idea how many walls Natalie had to knock down to get a story covered because our stories, in their eyes, were not sensational enough. The decision makers in a newsroom were middle-aged white men. And so
Mm-hmm.
we're pushing that agenda too to have more Black and brown going into public relations so they
Yes.
can be executives in those decision rooms.
It's interesting that two shows I watched this year where it focused on black women being missing and how it brought it to the forefront of how, like you said, they either want to classify them as runaways or it doesn't get any press at all, you know. So I really liked what Issa Rae did on Insecure with how she was able to link, you know, a missing persons kind of parody, so to speak. But
Yes.
what it really did is it really highlighted, you know, how a black woman is treated when she is missing. And so, and then also The Shy this season focuses on black and missing. And so I think that it is just very timely, you know, for us to be having these conversations, especially when it considering, you know, the violence and things like that happens with black women on a disproportionate level. So bringing it to the forefront and putting it out there is very important, and your organization is doing that. So that's what's up.
Thank you. And speaking of Issa Rae, they partnered with us, and HBO and Issa Rae, they contribute to our organization, and we have some other things in the works
So
that we're very excited about, and hopefully be releasing that really soon. But we're very happy that this it's such a sad and sensitive topic, but I'm glad that it's getting people attention,
yes.
and making them aware of what's happening, what's going on. Because when you look at the numbers don't lie, Carmen. As I stated in 2008, when we started the organization, 30% of missing persons were of color. That number has increased to 40%. And they're not just falling off the face of the earth. We have to do a better job, and it's everyone's responsibility. It's law enforcement, it's the media, and it's the community. You see something, say something.
Yeah, I was going to say, how can we help in finding our missing?
Actually, you all can go to our website. All of our social media handles are on there. Share the flyers. When you see a flyer, share it, share that post. If someone is distributing flyers in your neighborhood, take one. You have no idea how many people refuse to take a flyer of a missing person, when we're out there with the families distributing flyers. Just be able to circulate. Someone knows something. And I always use this as an example. So I'm in the DC area, and before this pandemic hit, we would travel to New York often. We will hop on a train at Union Station, and we will get to New York in 2.5 hours on the Acela. We print our tickets out at home, so no one ever asks us for our identification.
Mm-hmm.
And so to be able to travel from DC to New York in 2.5 hours, we can't wait on the news cycle. Just because a person is missing in DC doesn't mean that they're still in DC. They can be in New York, they can be in Boston. And that's why we had to utilize all of our partnership with our media, but we also use social media too, because everyone is walking around with a device in their hand. And if we can get these real-time alerts in their hands, someone's seen something, and we just want them to say something.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, you were talking about some of the challenges that you experienced as becoming one of the first Black African Americans, women on the police department in Great Falls, or I'm sorry, City of Falls Church. I always get it mixed up.
Yeah. They're
Falls
right
Church.
next door. They're right next door.
Are they really? Okay. See,
Yes.
I thought I knew my geography. Yeah, Falls Church. What other challenges have you experienced, and how have you overcame that adversity?
I look at everything, whether it's negative or positive, as a learning experience. So I don't really focus on the adversities. I focus on my growth as an individual. I'm a very faithful woman, and like I said, even with the organization, we knocking on doors, trying to get people to pay attention to our cases. We didn't stop. We just kept going.
Why did you
And
stay motivated? And even though, I mean, how and why did you stay motivated?
well, I'll tell you, since our inception, we have helped reunite or bring closure to over 300 families.
That's
And
amazing.
so that's motivation in itself when you're able to make a difference. And you know that you've done everything in your power to do all that you've been assigned to do. When I go to sleep at night, I can rest peacefully because I know I've did everything that I was assigned to do. And then I have little ones that's looking up to me. I want to be that role model for my children. I don't need, you know, the television to be that role model. I want them to see the role model in their parents right here. It starts in the home. And so that's how we raise our kids in our home, just, being that role model. So, we teach them, whatever the case may be, let's not focus on the negativity. Let's take whatever it is that's in front of us, whether it's, on the left or the right. How can we learn from this and how can we move forward?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, definitely taking whatever the situation is and pulling the good from it, pulling the lessons from it. And then no situation is bad, right?
You're absolutely right. And this is a funny story. I remember I did a panel interview for a job a few years back. And one of the questions from the panel interview was, could you name something? Can you name something negative? I'm paraphrasing here, but can you name something
Sure.
negative that you've experienced with a prior supervisor? And I'm sitting here, I'm like thinking to myself, is this a trick question?
Right, right.
And my response was, I've learned something from everyone that managed me. I learned what to do or what not to do.
Very good.
I just
Yeah.
move forward. Um, and so you can learn something from absolutely everybody. Everybody. You're going to learn what to do or what not to
What not
do.
to do. I like that. No, that's good. I'm gonna use that one. What to do and what not to do.
Yes, yes.
And so, where did you find yourself? Where'd you get this mindset from? Is it from your faith?
It really is from my faith. I was very close to my grandmother. She passed away in 2000. But my grandmother, as a young girl, you know, your elders would try to tell you things, and you're sitting there like, okay,
Hmm.
really, then a typical child or teenager, like, okay, they really don't know what they're talking about, but deep down inside, they know what they're talking about.
Right.
My grandmother used to tell me all the time, you kill a person with kindness. You have to
Hmm.
kill them with kindness. Now, I didn't realize what that was until I got older. So I was like, how am I going to feel? No, I want to have the last word. But, it's those little nuggets of wisdom that was showered upon me growing up that I now find myself going back to.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a really close relationship with my grandmother as well, and those lessons were so wonderful that that I got from her. And it's amazing how they can be so influential in your life. And I know that your grandmother was also influential in your next business that you've started, RLD
Yes.
Limited. So
Yes.
tell us how she was influential in that, and what does RLD stand for?
RLD stands for Ruby Lee Drummond. My grandmother, again, she won her battle with cancer in 2000. She actually passed away. I was holding her in my arms. I had made it home just in time from the DC area. I was the last family member that she was waiting to see. And I flew in that Friday, and I remember walking into the hospital room. And this is the first time I've ever shared this story publicly. I walked into the room, and the doctors, they had just obviously had shift change, and the doctor came in, and my grandmother's heart rate was racing. And I recall him saying, it's like she's trying to stay alive for something or someone. And when he said that, my mother looked up. She said she just walked in the door.
Hmm.
And that next day, we were all at the hospital in the room with my grandmother, and I was holding her. And I knew she was tired. She was ready to go. And I whispered in her ear, I said, Grandma, I know you're tired of suffering. And I told her to go home. And she took her last breath right away. And everything that I do, I want to make sure that I'm making her proud. And so in 2020, it's a decade. And I wanted to be able to honor my grandmother, who was all about making a difference in the community. She was definitely a community change agent. And this was just my way of, you know, putting her name out there and her legacy, building that legacy. And so with RLD, our our main focus and mission is to help small businesses and nonprofits succeed. You know, a lot of small businesses, they fail because they don't do the necessary vetting and screening when they're hiring people. Because you don't know, people lie on their resume. You know,
Yeah.
50% of resumes are untruthful. And so, you know, you work so hard to build your brand. And when you bring people in, you don't want to tear it down. And so this was my way of keeping my grandmother's memory alive and also getting to organizations and businesses a platform for them to be able to do their own self-service of doing their due diligence.
That's awesome. That is awesome. I love how you have tied all your experiences together to, to come about your purpose, your law
Yes.
enforcement into the Black and Missing Foundation, and then, the investigative work that you have to do there now into RLD Limited. So you've just taken all of your wonderful spirits and gifts and everything and just put them all into places where it can serve people.
Yeah, and I think that's what it's about, Carmen. You have to see what works for you. I manage a staff of 8 with my district government job, and my team, they will tell you, I always have empowerment sessions with them. And our empowerment sessions pre-COVID, we will have lunch out on a monthly basis, once a month, where we will all go to a restaurant. And my rule is we can't talk about work. I don't want to
Yes.
hear about work at
Creating
all.
some balance.
Yes, it is our lunch break. But that empowerment lunch is a way for us to support one another. What
Hmm.
is it that you're trying to do? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? And how can we support you? So, you know, you spend most of your waking day at work. So these people become your family. And so, you know, when I hear from my staff, you know, I want to purchase a house, I want to learn how to invest in stocks, you know, I want to go back to school, I want to start my own business. Okay, so what are you doing to get to this step, and how can we support you? And so that is so important for me, you know, and I think that right there helps me as well, because I have to disconnect as well. Like, I don't want to talk about work. I don't want to talk about anything. I want to know, how can I help you? Because me helping you also allows me to help myself.
That's right. That's right. A lot of leaders don't understand that,
Hmm.
that when you can pour into and sow into your staff, your employees, that only makes them better and more able to be present and available for to help you in your job and your position, and so
Right.
they're not so tired, or they're not so beat down, or they're not so in despair. You're actually serving and sowing into them. So that is a big part of leadership that I know that I prescribe to, and I hear that you prescribe to it as well. And it actually makes people, want to work for you.
Right. That, you know what, you're so right. It's so funny because I received a text from someone in another department last week asking to work for me. I'm like, well, I don't even have any openings.
See, there you go. People are trying to come work for you. Absolutely. So you are doing all of this stuff, and like you said, you are a mom to 2 kids. You are a wife. You. So when does Derrica take care of Derrica, and how does she do it?
Okay, so I really truly believe in taking care of myself, because I am no good to
Yay!
anyone else if I'm not good to myself.
That's right.
So there is a lake by my house. It's about 2 miles down the road. And I would go out and walk around the lake. One lap around the lake takes like 30 minutes. And so I would go out, I would walk around the lake with my headphones on. My husband and I would just purchase some bikes. So I alternate between walking and riding my bike. But I
What kind of
need
bike do
that.
you have? Because I'm in the market for some bikes right now. Do you have a
I have a mountain
hybrid,
bike,
a mountain bike?
a mountain bike, yes.
Oh, and you
And
ride,
I love it.
and you love it. Okay, that's all
I,
I needed to know.
I love it. I love it. And you know, that is just, that's my peace. That's my moment to myself. I'm having that intimate self moment with my thoughts. my music. Sometimes I want to listen to music, sometimes I don't. I just want to listen to God or just have that moment just to pray. When I work with families, sometimes it can be overwhelming. And so one of the questions that always come up is, well, how do you all take care of yourself? Well,
Yeah.
Natalie would tell you, being from Trinidad, she likes to listen to soca. Me being from the South, I like
Yes.
to listen to gospel.
Amen.
I feel that gospel really ministers to my soul. So once
Hmm.
I listen and I
Both
cry,
minister, both genres ministers to my soul. So
yeah.
yes.
Now listen,
I,
don't get me
I
wrong.
can be praising Jesus.
I have my playlists too. I have all my playlists, but I have to have that moment where when you cry, it cleanses. I need
Oh,
that. I need that complete
absolutely.
internal shower.
Yes. Yeah. No,
So
it,
I
it
can
does. It
give
cleanses you
more.
emotionally.
Yes, yes.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that you know the importance of self care and you're taking care of yourself because you are out here doing so much and taking care of others that I'm happy to know that Derrica is taking care of herself.
Yeah, thank you. My husband may say that I'm taking care of myself a little too much because during this whole COVID thing, I just turned around and I cut all my hair off and I dyed it blonde and I'm just like doing all type of crazy stuff.
Hey, no, that's
He's
all
like,
right. It looks good. I like it. I mean, hey, it's
thank
hair. It
you.
grows back. You know what
It
I'm
grows
saying?
back.
It looks amazing and I love
Thank
the
you.
energy that you are bringing and yes, the energy that you are bringing to yourself and loving yourself is just it's attractive. It's amazing and I love it. So, keep doing it.
Thank you. Thank you. I
Well,
appreciate that.
I appreciate you. So that's all for today. I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. And so tell the listeners and viewers how they can follow you and how they can get more information about Black and Missing and also RLD Limited.
Absolutely. I encourage everyone to visit our website. It's bamfi.org. It's BAMFI.org. All of our social media handles are on there. We encourage them to go on, like us, share these profiles, help us find us. It doesn't matter if that person is missing from your community or not. That person can be anywhere. And these families, they are desperately looking for their missing loved ones. And then with RLD, go to rldlimited.com. That's rldlimited.com. And you can learn more about the services that we offer. If you know anyone that has a business or organization, please encourage them to do their due diligence so their business will sustain. I really hate seeing people work so hard to build their empire for someone, one wrong hire to have that empire to crumble.
Absolutely. Great stuff. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Carmen, and you and your family stay healthy and safe. And let me know
You
when you're back in DC.
I will. You know I will.
Yes.
All right. Bye
Thank
bye.
you.